Well, hey, everybody. Happy Tuesday. It's Thursday. I don't even know what day it is. It's been a busy day. So sorry I'm a few minutes late here if you're watching live. The man suspected of robbing children of their go-kart is in custody after crashing into a tree. Wonder if he crashed into the tree with the go-kart. We're getting ready to record Mike in the Midwest. We're going to be talking about Mike's Midwest today. Kind of a fun show, I think. So we'll get cracking on that one. A little Coke Zero down the chute. And let's see what we got here. Keep going every day because I'm almost there. Almost there. All righty, let's do this. Episode 63. Well, hey, everybody. Happy Thursday, and welcome to episode number 63 of Mike in the Midwest, a mini podcast for the amazing patrons just like you who support the Be Our Guest podcast. Your support does allow us to put the show out all around the world. No kidding. The Be Our Guest podcast goes to all places around the globe. We hear from listeners from Australia, over in Europe. We've had a lot of South American listeners tune in. Of course, Latin America, Canada, England, all over the place. Japan. It's amazing that we can have a community that stretches beyond just, for me, as we're talking about Mike in the Midwest, here in the Midwestern United States, to have a global audience. But I think that's what's very cool about podcasting and about our community in particular, is that we all share a love for Disney, and we could talk about things. And of course, let me just say at the top of today's show, there have been a lot of changes over the past month or so. Some I think will have positive impacts on our Disney fandom. Some are challenging at this time. My attitude on these things is I'm kind of waiting to see how things come out. But as you know, and hopefully you can kind of guess what my philosophy is on things after sharing my thoughts for over 13 years on the big show, is that, you know, I want value in my Disney vacations. I don't have to always have a deluxe hotel room. I don't have to necessarily eat dinners at fancy signature restaurants. I'm fine eating counter service foods. That's what I do here at home. I'm good with a nice bed at Pop Century or an All-Star. It doesn't really bother me too much, but I do like to splurge from time to time. And the thing is, Disney's kind of changing how we go about our Disney vacations. I was a big fan way back in the day of the Ultimate Park Hopper ticket. This was back in the early 2000s where you would buy, you would say, I want to stay at Pop Century. Well, Pop Century wasn't even there, but I want to stay at All-Star Sports for a week. And what happened was you got a ticket that got you into any of the theme parks, any of the water parks for the length of your stay. You didn't have to think much, but then they switched over to the Magic Your Way tickets, which I will admit gave you more control over your vacation, because instead of paying for a ticket that was part of your package for the length of your stay, if you only wanted to go to the parks 4 out of those 7 days, you only had to pay for 4 out of the 7 days. But then you had other options like the park hopper, the water park, stuff like that. So I'm like an all-inclusive type guy. It's why I like cruising. I don't have to look at the menus and the prices and everything. I just order what I like. But we'll see how things shake out. So I just want to say that off the top of the show. It is an exciting time to have a Disney podcast, but please hang in there with us. Disney doesn't call me to make these decisions. I'm trying to, do everything we can to explain things clearly. I hope we do that on tomorrow, Friday's podcast. We talk about annual passes and Genie Plus and Lightning Lanes. Let's see how things shake out. But hang with us because we are a community and we'll always stick together. And we'll get through this. We'll make sure that our vacations are better than ever here as we wrap up 2021 and move into the future in 2022. Just wanted to say that off the top of the show there, because that's just something I was thinking about. Another thing I'm thinking about right now, college football is back in high school football. This is one of my favorite times of the year. My St. Louis Cardinals in baseball kind of fading. Yesterday, we looked like we might make a move on the Cincinnati Reds and then laid an egg in the second game of a doubleheader. So it's football season. So I'm excited for that because it's not only football. It's communities coming together. It's my family coming together. We all like football. We love going to the games. And it's more than just going to Mizzou on Saturday and sitting in Memorial Stadium for Rowe Field watching our Tigers. It's tailgating before. It's going to Shakespeare's Pizza before that for lunch. It's seeing my brother and sister-in-law out at their lot as they tailgate. It's just seeing, old friends and seeing Truman, the Tiger, and hearing Big Mo get banged on our big drum, doing the MIZZOU cheer with hopefully another 60,000 fans in the stadium. So I'm excited for that. This Friday night, though, watch my Instagram because this is one of the things I love about where we moved. Our high school football team is pretty good. We're ranked 6th in the state right now. The Francis Howell Vikings. And we went to the game last week. It was almost sold out, not totally sold out of the high school stadium. This Friday night's game is my favorite game of the year because it's the first responders night, which means our team honors all of the first responders and healthcare workers, the police officers, the firefighters. We also are honoring the health care professionals. It's a night to honor those who serve us. And we didn't get to do this last year because obviously COVID. We had to watch. They didn't allow spectators at the football games last year, so we watched them on streaming TV, which was terrible. But in 2019, we had just moved to this community. We moved in late July. We moved like the last day of July in 2019 to our house where we live now. So I was excited because where I used to live, we didn't have Friday night lights. They didn't allow it because there was a lot of violence at the football games. They didn't allow Friday night games. They had to play on Saturday mornings. So out here, they have Friday night lights, Friday night football games, and the community comes together. So anyway, I was like, I got to go. I didn't even know like the high school Mallory was going to go to. So I looked it up. Francis Howell, found it on a map. And I told my wife, I was like, I'm going to the high school football game. It's down the road. It's about 2 miles from our house, the high school. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so great. It's like you see on the TV or like movies. The community's all together. Everybody's cheering the band. So our high school, like they have fireworks before the game when they announce the football team onto the field. They come through the banner like, you see in all 80s movies. But we have fireworks. I mean, that's crazy. We have Disney didn't even have fireworks there for a few months. But it's nuts. I mean, when we were in high school, we couldn't have dreamed of that. But anyway, this is first responder night, this Friday night. I'm going to put a lot of the coverage on Instagram. So check that out at BRGusMike. There will be, now check this out. This is crazy. The game ball gets delivered by a helicopter. So the police helicopter comes, lands on the 50. The police officer jumps out of the chopper, hands the football to the ref, and then flies back off. And I love like the air demonstrations and stuff like that. So I'm in heaven. They also at halftime, they have this club. And I was speaking with one of our guests. He'll be on Monday, Evan. There's a group of veterans that ride on Harleys. And a lot of times I see they do rallies for fallen soldiers around Missouri. I don't know if this is a national thing or not, kind of with our topic today. But they ride Harleys and they're like they try to remember POWs, MIA soldiers, and they always have like big American flags on the back of their hogs there. And so during this game, they bring in, maybe it's the Patriot Guard. I could be wrong. I'm just trying to remember what they're called. But they come on their Harleys, and of course we have a 1/4-mile track, running track around our football field. They bring their Harleys and line up, and they have a line all the way around the track, and they parade slowly. It is amazing. And also this year, I think, because we've been teased last Friday, they said during the national anthem, there's going to be a surprise this year. So either, I'm guessing it's one of two things. Either, now again, this is a high school. This isn't Mizzou. This is a high school game. Either we're going to get a flyby by a military aircraft during the national anthem, or I was talking to my dad the other night. He said maybe somebody's going to parachute in, like with the flag. So who knows? Because he was working the Rams game because he works for the Rams. He was working the Rams game against Denver last week. He was out in a Mile High Stadium, and he was filling with the computers, getting everything set up for all the announcers because he's the engineer in the booth. He said he looked up, and it scared him to death because he like just happened to look up and he thought somebody fell out of the top bank of the stands at Mile High Stadium, because all of a sudden he saw a body like falling down to the field. And then he saw the guy shoot. It was a parachuter coming in at the very end of the national anthem. So I was cracking up that my dad had a heart attack there because he thought a fan fell out of the stands because he just glanced out of this corner of his eye, but it ended up being a parachute person coming in as part of the pregame show. So maybe we'll have that. But it's just like the fact that we can all get together and enjoy our community, celebrate the kids in the band, the cheerleaders, the dancers, the Golden Girls, the football players, the teachers that are there as sponsors. In this night, it is really special to celebrate our first responders. Think about what they've been through. Well, we've all been through a lot, but I mean, nurses, doctors, teachers, paramedics, firemen, police officers. We love you guys. And this is a chance for our community to be able to, as one, stand up, give a standing ovation to the heroes that live next door, that live across the street, that maybe live in our own households. And we don't even tell them thanks. Like, I'm married to a teacher, and I don't know if I've told her thanks enough for what she does. She does an amazing job. She learned to do a whole new way of teaching last year and did it better than anyone I ever saw because she's not a computer person and she excelled with distance learning. Anyway, yeah, I'm jacked up. This is going to be a good weekend. Tonight we get Tennessee. I'm not a big Tennessee fan, but I love SEC football. So I get to watch Tennessee tonight, Friday night lights. Got a little Howell football. And then Saturday, get to head out to Mizzou. You can check the game out on SEC Network. 4 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock Central. We got to beat Central Michigan. But let's get to let's get to the feedback from last week's show. Then let's hit today's topic. So last week I talked about random summer thoughts. And one of the things that really struck, Paul, he was sending me some crazy emails about how I was scared of that high chair at my grandparents' house and how it freaked me out. It would chase me around the circle around their house. Yeah, that was a real thing. I am not kidding. That was a real thing that I had the nightmare about the high chair. And I bet you had some kind of whacked out Fantasia-like nightmare when you were a kid too. I just shared it behind a microphone, which was probably a mistake. Okay, let's get to the feedback about random summer memories. Trisha Hellwig, I love when she chimes in here. We appreciate her so much. Also over on the Discord, she is great. She said, as a kid, the tornado sirens would go off half the summer. After 7 years, my daughter finally had her first tornado warning, likely due to advancements in technology. It brought back memories of sitting in the basement, except she had it good. We watched the Olympics on an iPad. Okay, a couple things with this one. I was talking about how the tornado siren like freaked me out. Just looking at it as a kid, it looked ominous on top of that pole. Like the big horn that would rotate 360 degrees. It was so loud. We got caught in it one time and just like riding bikes so fast we thought we were going to have a heart attack. Trisha's exactly right, though. So when we were kids, I think the rule was that if there was a tornado warning for any county that bordered St. Louis County where we lived, they had to set off the tornado siren. So if, I apologize for Riley, I don't know, I'm the only one home, so I don't know what's going on there. Hey, sorry about that. And so, come here. Riley. So I think things have changed because when I was a kid, I think the rule was that if there was a tornado warning for any county that bordered St. Louis County, that touched St. Louis County, they had to set the alarm off in our county as well. And we have a lot of counties around us, and they're pretty far away because we're up in the northwestern part of our county. So if there was a tornado warning in Jefferson County, which was to the south, it could be 100 miles away, and they were still setting off that tornado warning. So you're exactly right. I mean, it could be sunny where we were. And you're right. They don't go off as often now. And if they do, they're a lot more serious. I think it's coming at you pretty seriously if they do set them off. But you're right. When I was a kid, if we went to the basement, it was an unfinished basement. Like it was like going into a cave. You go into our basement now, we have, the big TV, got a little, one of those little NES things, set up where you can play the old, it's not a real NES, it's the emulator thing that plays like 30 games. You have, down here it's the podcast studio. You got a computer and you got everything you need, a treadmill. going into the basement is not a big deal where I live, but that's going to have something to do with today's topic. So we'll talk about that here in a second. Thanks for the feedback, Trisha. And let's hopefully no more tornado warnings. This has been a bad week for weather. Christine Ball gave some feedback. She says, when I was growing up in the small town in the 80s, our tornado siren was also the fire siren. It was the same siren, but the fire one would drop down and go back up several times while the tornado siren stayed at the same tone. The fire station was volunteers, so the siren would go off to tell the firefighters there was a call. This was before cell phones. Then when the weather looked bad and the sirens went off, we could all stop and listen for a few seconds to see if it was a fire siren or a tornado siren. I'd forgotten all about that until your story. Christine, I've never heard this before. This is why podcasting is so great. And this is why I want to talk about today's topic. First of all, I had no idea that there was a fire siren, but it makes sense to get all the volunteer firemen back to the house to battle a fire. But I always thought it was, everybody there was a crew that always stayed at the firehouse and would take off, they'd go down the pole. I don't know if that's a thing or not. They'd jump in the boots and the big coats and hop in the big truck and go take care of the fire. That's very, very interesting. I had no idea about that. So Christine, thank you so much for being a patron, and thank you so much for sharing your stories. If you have any comments on today's topic or any topic at all, just go to patreon.com/BeOurGuestPodcast. Let us know, and we'll share that on next Thursday's podcast. Okay, today's show, I want to talk about something real quick. Not super long, but just something I've been thinking about here as I've watched the coverage of Irma. I'm a weather nut. I don't know if I talk about that on the podcast or not, but I am a person. I would have loved to have gone into becoming a meteorologist and being on TV or the radio and doing that. I wanted to be a teacher more, but that's something I would have loved to have done. I'm obsessed with weather. And so the thing is I've watched the coverage of Irma and again, our thoughts and prayers with everybody in Louisiana and Alabama, Mississippi, down on the Gulf Coast. And now all of our friends that are up in the Northeast with all the, tornadoes in New Jersey and Philadelphia and the extreme rain up in New York and Rhode Island and Connecticut. I promise you, I've been saying prayers for you guys. It does make a difference, and I hope you are doing okay. It really bothers me because with the podcast, I do have friends all over the place. So I know my friends down in the Gulf Coast, and I was worried about them. And then last night I'm seeing all these horrible images of water just pouring into subways and, into apartment buildings and the Newark airport, it bothers me because I know that my friends are close to that now. So I hope everybody's doing well with that. But what I wanted to talk about today was the show is called Mike in the Midwest. And I've given stories about growing up here, but I thought, maybe you would like to know about what my Midwest really is like. Okay. And here's how I came up with this topic. I listen to a lot of other podcasts, different topics. So for example, I listened to a podcast called The Negative Splits. And if you don't know what the negative splits means, in running, a negative split race is where every mile you get a little bit faster than the mile before. So if you run the first mile in 10 minutes, to run negative splits, your next mile would have to be less than 10. So say it's a 950. Then the next lap or the next mile would be 940 or even 949. As long as you're going negative from the previous mile, you're running a negative split race, which is kind of a goal for runners. Not really for me. I'm too old, but that's like always a good thing in training. If you can get negative splits, you're getting stronger. Anyway, long story, doesn't have anything to do with anything, but it's three guys that are in Buffalo, New York. Okay. So the thing is, they talk about running a lot and they talk about where they run and the paths they run on and the races that they do. Well, I've never been anywhere close to Buffalo, New York, to upstate New York. So I hear them talking about running on these trails and running along the, the Niagara Falls, and being right there at the Canada border. And so in my mind's eye, as I listen to this podcast, I know that their world that they're living in is a lot different than mine. And it sounds super interesting. I'm always curious about what do they do? And so they talk about places they go, parks and restaurants. And I've never heard of any of these places. So that always has me curious. Listen to another podcast. It's a retro podcast about 80s topics, toys, and so forth. And they talk about, stores they go to. One of the hosts is in like out in the country in Virginia, kind of by Tennessee. And the other host is in Montgomery, Alabama. So they talk about the places they go. They go to a place called Ollie's. They're always talking about a place called Ollie's. We don't have an Ollie's here, but it sounds like it's a cool discount store. So in my world, Ollie's does not exist. But I listen to this podcast in my mind's eye. I make this store out to be something great, which I think from research, it's kind of just like a dollar store or like a Five Below, but I'm not sure. Another place they talk about on that podcast all the time is a place called Hills. And apparently this was a toy store in the back in the day. It was a toy store and their mascot was a little elf and they had a little snack bar inside of the store. I've never seen a Hills. I have never heard of a Hills. But because of podcasting and other shows that I've listened to, in my mind's eye, this store called Hills seems like it was the greatest store of all time. So on today's show, I kind of like to share with you where in the Midwest am I? And what do I have around me that might be the same as you and different than you? So right now, where I live, we moved about 18 miles from where I originally lived in Florissant, Missouri. We live in a place called St. Peters, Missouri. It's in St. Charles County. We live right on the Missouri River. So we can get to the Missouri River in about 3 or 4 minutes if we have to. If I had a drone, I could probably fly to the Missouri River probably in less time than that. We're really, really close to the Missouri River. So we live in a county called St. Charles County. It's adjacent to St. Louis County. If you're looking at St. Louis City, like where the Arch is, if you've never been to St. Louis, you probably heard of the Arch or the baseball stadium for the Cardinals. We live about 30 to 35 minutes drive from downtown. And we're west. We're west of the city, a little bit southwest. So where I live, our department store, and I think this is going to be the same for a lot of folks, is Target. We go to Target. We go to Walmart. I should say, I go to Walmart because I get good deals there on things like Coke Zero and stuff. My wife and my daughters, they only like to go to Target. Now, Target's only 0.5 miles from our house. It's right across the highway. So it's dangerous that it's that close. But yeah, so that's where we shop. I don't know where you shop. I know some places. I was listening to here's another thing that got brought up. I was listening to another podcast about old computers the other day, and they're based out of Northern Illinois, and they were talking about Jewel Osco. And I've seen that in like the Blues Brothers movies, Jewel. And I've been to Chicago a few times. I know there's Jewels, but is it a grocery store? Is it a drugstore? Is it like a Walgreens? I'm not really sure. And I find that stuff interesting. And I'll be up in Chicago for the Chicago Marathon on October 10th. So maybe I'll check out a Jewel or an Osco because I just love those regional type things. Also, our grocery stores here, where we get our groceries, we go to either Schnucks or we go to Deerberg's. So those are two local grocery chains that we go to. We don't have Publix. We don't have Winn-Dixie. We don't have Piggly Wiggly's. I just like saying that. We don't have any of those, but we have Schnucks, which I know Schnucks is kind of around the Midwest. They're in Illinois. They're in Kansas, I think, but they're not real big. And then Deerberg's is definitely a St. Louis thing. So those are our grocery stores. So again, I want to hear some of the feedback on like what your place is. And those are really nice grocery stores. They advertise on the Cardinals games and so forth. So you hear about it a lot. Especially Schnucks. Schnucks is like the hometown grocer. They got like 50 locations in St. Louis. So it's not like a one place. They're all over St. Louis. They're just probably not all over the nation. Okay, what else? Here's one thing I was thinking about the other night, or actually last night as I was watching the coverage of all that flooding that was horrible up in New York. They're showing the subway stations. You know, all this water rushing into the subway stations. Where I live, it is so different than New York City, where you have subways. So obviously we don't have subways, but you might be surprised if you go downtown or even to our airport, we have a light rail system, which is like a subway, but it's above ground and it's called Metrolink. It's, it's a bunch of like trains that go, it's almost like a monorail, but it's on train tracks. And it takes you from the airport to downtown, across into Illinois to some places in Illinois. Just like the subway, you buy a little ticket, you get on. It's not the safest thing in the world, but it's there. It does go underground when you go into downtown. So it's kind of like a subway downtown for a few stations, but we do have that. But as I was thinking about this, and I've been listening to other podcasts too, like I say, I love podcasts because I learn about people, not just about the topic, but about the person, about the host. And I love that kind of, I don't know how you feel about that, but I love when hosts talk about their personal lives because as much as I like the topic of retro computing or technology or running or reality TV, what have you, I listen to all kinds of shows. It's kind of fun to see who the person is behind the mic for me. I like to know a little bit about them, What's their family like? What was it like? Where do they grow up? Where do they like to go to get some fast food? That stuff's interesting to me. Maybe not to you. I'm curious about that. Let me know. How do you feel about that? Anyway, so I was hearing, another podcast. Actually, it was 3020. I was listening to Matt and Kevin. And Matt and I think we've grown up pretty much similar situations, right? We're both in Missouri. He's down in the Ozarks, down in Springfield. I'm up here in the suburbs of St. Louis. But I think for the most part, we have kind of the same like life. We have a house, we have a yard, we have a car for everybody. I hear some of my podcasting, co-hosts that I listen to, and like some of these folks do not have a car. Now, see, to me, that is shocking because from the time where I live and where I grew up here in Missouri, from the time you were 12, your goal was to get your own car. Didn't matter if it was a beater, didn't matter if it was ugly, didn't matter if it sputtered down the road. You just wanted to have your own vehicle. And for the most part, when you're 16, you get a part-time job slinging burgers or working at the skating rink or what have you, lifeguarding. You save your money to get your first used car. And then where I live, everybody has a car that drives. I mean, Paige, when she was 16, she shared our cars for like a couple of years. But when she got to be 18, she got my grandma's car. When my grandma passed away, I bought the car from my dad. That was her first car. She drove it for years. But everybody needs kind of their own vehicle once they're like 16, 17, 18, where I live, because there's no mass transit. There's no buses out here. You either drive somewhere. You can't really ride a bike where I live because we live on a highway. You can't really cross the highway on a bike. So you really do need a car where I live. And it's just how it is. But then I hear all these other podcasters that, they're my age, they're in their 40s and they don't have a driver's license. And to me, that is just so interesting because I've been driving since I was 12, not tractors and lawnmowers and stuff. But I mean, I skipped school on my 16th birthday and got my license and have not stopped driving since. And that is exactly how every one of my friends did the same thing. So it's interesting to me that people that are in more metropolitan areas, they could be 45 and not have a car. Like how that could be so refreshing, right? You don't have to worry about your license expiring. You don't have to worry about getting your car inspected, getting tires on it, getting the oil changed. I mean, but I mean, I love having my Jeep. It's an old Jeep. It's a 2012 Jeep, and I don't care. It's the greatest thing in the world. I got the doors off, the top off. It's great. It's like a big toy. And every time I drive that thing, I've had a Jeep since 2000. I'm just like a kid in a candy store driving a Jeep. So that's just how life is different where I live. Also, where I live, everybody has, for the most part, once you get like out of college, you have a house with a yard, right? So you have a yard, you got a lawnmower. I know a lot of people that I listen to on other podcasts that are based out of larger metropolitan areas. They live in places that are either like an apartment complex, a condo complex, somewhere where they don't have a yard. And I'm just saying that because yards are great and they're a pain in the rear. So this time of year when it's been, oh my gosh, 95 with like 95% humidity, our yard is dead because it hasn't rained here a whole lot. And so the thing was, you still got to cut your grass because you get the tall sprigs that are all over the place. And we have a decent sized yard, nothing big. We have an average yard in our subdivision, but you got to cut it because there's a subdivision committee that if you don't cut your grass, they'll come send you a letter, then you'll get in trouble, which we never get to that. We cut our grass once a week. That's just part of the deal. But we're always worried about that. But like where I live, you got to worry about cutting your grass. You got to worry about having a lawnmower. And so many people that I listen to on other shows, they don't have a yard. So they don't have a lawnmower. So they don't have to worry about that weekly chore of going out there and cutting the grass. And some people call it mowing the lawn. I've always called it cutting the grass. That's just, we gotta go cut the grass. So my dad would tell me, go cut the grass. And so I find that super interesting. But also, let me tell you, mowing the yard or cutting the grass is a great time to just have an hour to yourself to listen to podcasts, listen to music, get a little exercise, get outside. Interesting stuff. Okay, so a couple other things. Where I live, we do have Chick-fil-A's. We have a Chick-fil-A less than a mile from the house. You've probably seen it's 0.7. It's across the street from the Target. It's a standalone store, which back in the day too, in St. Louis, we never had Chick-fil-A like standalone stores. What we had was Chick-fil-A, but it was only in food courts at malls. Until I remember the first time we drove to Walt Disney World in the 2000s, like or mid 2000s, there was a standalone Chick-fil-A as we drove through Georgia. And I told Pam, I was like, that's a Chick-fil-A and it is not in a mall. My mind was blown that you could go to a Chick-fil-A, drive through, and I have to go into a mall and get a chicken sandwich and some waffle fries. So I was kind of blown away by that, but we have one of those now by us. Another place we have is Lion's Choice. I don't think you have these anywhere else. It's a roast beef fast food joint. And the roast beef is rare. If you ever go to Lion's Choice, it is super tasty, seasoned very well. But my wife, my wife gets Lion's Choice a lot, and she always is like, ugh, it's a little pink for me. Lion's Choice is known for serving roast beef on a sandwich, but it is kind of, it's not rare, but it is a little bit pink. And my wife doesn't like anything pink, but she keeps going back and she says, oh, I didn't cook it enough. That's kind of their thing. But yeah, we have Lion's Choice. Very, very tasty. Of course, we have Taco Bell. We have Burger King. We have White Castle. We have Popeyes. We have Raising Cane's chicken across the street from Chick-fil-A. You know, we have a lot of the same things that I bet you have. We have White Castle. I don't know if you have White Castle. We do. Little slider burgers. They used to be about $0.25. Now they're probably about 70 cents, or I don't even know. I haven't looked at the menu. When you order them, like, for example, when I order White Castles, I get a half dozen. I get 6 because they're real little. They got onions on them and they're super tasty. Now in the South, I know you have Crystal. I loved Crystal when I worked at Space Camp in Alabama. I get those all the time. They have mustard on them, I think. So it's kind of the same thing. I think White Castles taste a little bit better, but Crystals are good. We have like Long John Silvers and stuff like that. So we have a lot of the same things, but we have a few different things. So, you know, as you picture the Be Our Guest podcast and we talk about our stories, that's a little bit more about where I am geographically and as far as what my world looks like that I interact with each and every day. We have a lot of little communities around us. Weldon Springs, we have Cottleville, we have O'Fallon, we have Dardine Prairie. We have all these little towns around us. And one of the other things that's kind of unique about where I live is that not only are things determined by like your school district, what school you go to, and what town you live in. We live on the very corner of St. Peter's. We're actually really close to Weldon Spring. But the thing is also for Catholics, and I'm not Catholic, I'm Baptist, but or grew up Baptist, is that a lot of the geography of where we live in the greater St. Louis area is determined by the parish of the Catholic Church that you're near. So like I know where we live, we're in the St. Joseph's Parish now, which is a huge Catholic church, Catholic school. And as a kid, I remember my dad was in a band, and every year, this is another Midwestern thing, every year St. Joseph's would have their big parish picnic. And if you've never gone to a Catholic church's parish picnic, they are awesome. They have live music. Like I said, my dad's band would play both days of the picnic. They had rides. They had animals. They had like a bingo. They had cakewalks. I mean, it was everybody. I mean, we lived like 30 miles away from this place, and his band played. I would come out and I just hang out at that parish picnic all day, both days. It was amazing. And here's the sad thing. Now that we live out here, the time they had their parish picnic for 2021, it was the week we were at Disney. I was so bummed because we missed it. I wanted to go for the first time since I was like 12. But it's kind of determined, like, you know, what parish you live in. Like at our old house in Florissant, we lived in the St. Sabina parish. So we'd always go to their parish picnic, but it wasn't as big as St. Joe's when I was a kid. So it's just kind of one of those things. I don't know what it's like where you live. Is it the same? Do you have are you kind of associated with your school district? Are you associated with your Catholic church or a different kind of church? Where do you shop? Do you have a unique kind of grocery store or department store that's famous for where you live? We all have Home Depots and Lowe's and stuff like that. I think we're all similar there. We have malls. We have like Dick's Sporting Goods, Academy Sports, stuff like that. I want to hear about your little corner of the world. So if you don't mind this week, drop me a line, a quick little paragraph over at patreon.com/beourguestpodcast so we can share that next week. But now you know a little bit more about Mike's Midwest. What does Mike's little corner of the world look like? And now, if you're like me and you listen to the Be Our Guest podcast, you have a little bit better idea of what my corner of the world looks like. So I hope you're staying safe. I hope you are having a great week, and I hope you have a great Labor Day weekend. As always, I appreciate your friendship so much. When you support the show, you are a friend of the show. You are one of my friends. I promise you that. I hope to see you at Walt Disney World sometime. I would love to shake your hand and just thank you in person for the support that you give our show, because I sure love doing the podcast and I sure love having you as a friend on the other end. So until we talk again, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you real soon. Alrighty.